So there's one type of comment I come across nearly every day, and that is, when is the iPad mini 6 coming out? Because of course at one point in time, we were pretty sure about it coming out in March, but then we saw nothing. And so, of course, a lot of you guys are wondering, when can we expect the next generation iPad mini to drop? Well, after weeks and weeks of silence and pretty much nothing about the new iPad mini, we finally have a tidbit from the newest Weibo leaker on the block, Mr. Uncle Pan, who doesn't give us any good news because he says the iPad mini is out of play. Now do note, that was translated from Chinese using Google Translate, and so something could be lost in translation, but either way, it does seem for the most part, the iPad mini 6 has been pushed back. And so let's delve into it and also compile all the leaks and rumors we know so far about this major update to the iPad mini line. And so without further ado, make sure to like and subscribe for the latest Apple news and rumors. And with that being said, let's just tuck in. Now I do want to say there is a huge disclaimer to be aware of, and that is Uncle Pan is a very new leaker, and so he has no credibility whatsoever, and so we do have to take the information with a grain of salt. But there are a few reasons why we should believe him, and that really begins with the tidbits he's leaked so far because they do seem pretty legit. So to begin with, he gave us this label from the packaging of the Magic Keyboards, and as you can see, this looks pretty darn close to what we have today, and of course, it does mention the 3rd generation 11-inch iPad Pro, which should be the 2021 version that is launching pretty soon. Additionally, he also leaked the colors of the spring cases that we can expect for the iPhone 12 series. In fact, he gave us images of the actual MagSafe animation, and so clearly he's had hands-on experience with these cases. He's put it on a phone and he's taken a screenshot of the animation, and so it does seem like he is pretty legit and has some deep connections within the supply chain. And so basically, coming back to the iPad mini, when he says out of play, I think he hasn't seen any evidence for mass production beginning for the iPad mini 6, and so that clearly means that the release isn't anytime soon. Now this would actually tie in perfectly with a leak from Mr. Kang, the most reliable Apple leaker there is, who basically said the iPad mini 6 is still in the early stages of development, and so that basically means that Apple hasn't even confirmed and finalized the official design, and so we are still months away from mass production, which means release isn't happening anytime soon. In fact, Kang does go into further detail about this and says the iPad mini 6 is still in the P2 stage, and as you can see, there are 7 stages in total, and so Apple does have a long way to go with the development of this new iPad mini. Now, of course, after reading all this, I was wondering to myself that maybe the iPad mini 6 would launch in early 2022 instead, alongside a new iPad Air that we've heard about that could feature an OLED display. Now, before lots of you start panicking, I do want to say that thankfully, this might not be the case because Mark Gurman does say in his report about the iPads that we could see in 2021 that yes, a new iPad mini with a larger screen could launch as early as this year. Now, unfortunately, Mark Gurman is pretty vague about this, but I do think that's because the product is still in development and so things can change. Hence why he says as early as 2021. And by the way, in this same report, he says the iPad Pros could be coming out in April. So clearly we won't see the iPad mini this month. Otherwise, he would have mentioned it in the report. And so yes, it does seem like the iPad mini is still in early development. And so much like I said, the release isn't happening anytime soon. So of course, the next logical question is, when can we expect this iPad mini 6 to launch? Well, because the product is still in early development, We can't know for sure, but of course, if I were to speculate, I think it makes sense that Apple drops it alongside the iPad 9 we can expect in September, because if you remember last year, the iPad Air and the iPad 8 launched together, and so much like that, we see iPad mini 6 and of course iPad 9 launched together in the second half of the year. Now let's cover two final tidbits. We first have this image of the iPad mini 6 allegedly that leaked on Weibo, though do note, this schematic looks very similar to the iPad Air. And yes, I know that makes sense because the iPad mini should be a smaller version of the Air, but the resemblance is uncanny, and it's likely someone has just copy and pasted the schematic of the Air and called it the iPad mini 6. But either way, what we see here does make a lot of sense. We should see Touch ID in the power button much like the iPad Air, and of course dual speakers on both sides, again, much like the Air. I also want to mention that we do know the screen will be 8.7 inches, and so it's going to be a little wider than I thought, which I'm not sure about. I would much rather have the same 7.9 inch screen with, of course, a smaller body, but I guess we have to see the real product in person before we judge the new aspect ratio. And finally, I want to address Makoto report that basically stated the iPad mini 6 would launch in early 2021 without a major redesign, instead a slightly larger 8.4 inch display with the same Apple Pencil 1 support, the Lightning port, and unfortunately the same old Touch ID home button. Now yes, I know that Makoto has been accurate in the past, but I do think this is a false report, mainly because no one else has mentioned anything about this 8.4 inch iPad mini. Every other source has said we're seeing a major redesign to the iPad mini, something on par with the iPad Pro and iPad Air, and so I don't think this iPad mini they describe is happening. However, I have seen the iPad mini Pro name going around, and especially since the redesign should increase the price, there might be a possibility we see two tiers of the iPad mini, so iPad mini and iPad mini Pro, though ultimately I don't think that's very likely since the iPad mini isn't a very popular product in the first place, and so why make two versions of a product that doesn't have a huge audience in the first place? But tell me in the comments below, are you planning to wait for the iPad mini 6 even if it doesn't release till the end of 2021? Anyways, thank you for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. For the latest Apple news and rumors, check out the video in the icon above about our first look at the iPhone 13 through some leaked dummy units. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. See ya, peeps.